Uniquely amongst television shows, we have a thing we like to call a website, and here it is, abc.net.au/Enough Rope. It has all the details about the show, and it also has transcripts of this part of it, Show and Tell. Will you please welcome Peta King? Welcome, Peta. Thank you. Peta, you have an unusual profession. What's that?
Well, I run a fantasy phone line.
What's it called?
Grandma's Live Phone Talk.
OK. And how did you get into that line of business?
Well, I had an accident a few years ago. I broke my leg and I was trapped in the car for 3 days before I was found. And while I was sort of commiserating with being there, I remembered an article that I'd read just a few months before about fantasy phone lines in America. So when I got out of the hospital after all the trauma and everything, I put a few ads in the paper in Sydney and I was amazed at the response. Let
me take you back to your first call, because how do you know what to do, what to say?
Well, it was a bit of a disaster, the first one, because I really didn't know what to say. But fortunately, the guy knew what he wanted, so he just said what he wanted and I just went along with it.
So I'm still confused. He rings up. What do you say in that situation?
Well, I just sort of said hello, and he gave me his credit card details, and then we just sort of... I said to him, "Oh, what would you like to talk about today?" And he went on with what he wanted, and I just went along with it and took the cue from him and just carried on with it, and he got off and everybody was happy.
So have you had to... you've obviously had to broaden your repertoire. Obviously,
yes.
Credit card details are only a turn-on for so many people. How have you broadened your repertoire? Where have you learnt?
Well, just by practice. I mean, the sort of things that turn guys on are absolutely incredible. You'd never in a million years believe half of them.
Try me.
Well, one of my most unusual callers, before he books the call, he rings and says he'll be ringing in 10 minutes. He's got to turn the iron on. So, 10 minutes, he rings back. We do the call, and then just before he goes off, he irons his cock. And that is what gets him off. A fantasy phone line is the university of life, believe me.
What kind of people call?
All sorts. You name it, they call.
I mean, the obvious answer will be that they're after sexual gratification, but are there different reasons people call?
Yes. A lot of lonely people call who just don't have contact with other people, or guys who can't talk to women, mainly because they're guys who live on outback stations and there's no women around and they're just not comfortable talking to women. So they ring up and they can talk when they're not face-to-face with us.
It's really interesting. You call yourself Grandma's... what is it? Grandma's phone...
Live phone talk.
Which means that people ringing up are expecting to speak to a grandmother. Does that surprise you?
Not really. The amount of guys who like large older ladies, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible. I think because the young women these days... I mean, guys like a bit more than just the sex. I mean, our calls go for 15 minutes. Now, it takes most of the guys about 3 or 4 minutes to get off. So for the rest of the time, they just talk about anything. I've got a guy who rings me up 3 or 4 times a week, and all we do is talk about politics, because he's got nobody who he can talk about politics to intelligently.
That's Peter Costello. It might be. You better check.
We do have quite a few conversations about Peter Costello, but no, it's not him.
Stop it, I'm getting off now. Is this the voice you use on the phone?
No. I drop it a few decibels and purr.
Can you give us a sample?
Well, I don't really know, but I can probably try.
I want to talk politics. Where's the most unusual place you've taken a call?
Well, I was in the supermarket once and this guy rang and he was a regular caller and I knew he only took about 3 or 4 minutes. And to the back of the supermarket into what I thought was a quiet corner, gave him the call, and when he'd finished and I'd hung up and I walked round the corner, there was a guy just doing his pants up round the corner. So he got a freebie as well.
That would have been the 8 items or less aisle, I'm guessing.
Yes.
What do you think of men?
Do I have to answer that question?
You don't have to.
Well, I think they're ruled by one thing and they can only focus on one thing at a time, which is what hangs below their belly. And I think that's why the world's in such a mess, because men can't focus on anything else.
I've just given a new meaning to the expression, the root of all evil, I think.
You could put it that way.
Have you ever, in the course of your calls, made a genuine connection with a caller?
No. But a few of my ladies have, and once they've met them, the calls have lost their fantasy and you don't hear from the guys again. Because on a fantasy call, fantasy is the key word. You can be whatever the guy imagines you to be. If he imagines you as Marilyn Monroe, then if you meet him and you're not Marilyn Monroe or you don't look like Marilyn Monroe, the fantasy's gone. So therefore you've lost him as a caller.
Do you ever fantasise when you're talking with someone?
Sometimes.
What makes you fantasise?
Just depending on what sort of a mood I'm in and what sort of fantasy he's got. If he's got a really romantic fantasy, I can get into it really with him because, you know, it's nice and romantic. But the weirdo ones, no.
So you're not an ironing cock kind of woman?
Definitely not.
You know, I've never had to ask that question in an interview before.
Well, there's a first time for everything.
That's right. Is there a decent living in it?
There used to be, not so much now. Since the interest rate started to rise, cocks haven't been rising.
That's what's known as the credit squeeze.
Yes, that is it, exactly.
Look, I think we could do double entendres all night, but... Peter, it's very interesting to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. That's all from Enough Rope. We'll see you again next week. Until then, good night. See you.